While everyone else stepped back, she stepped forward with trembling hands and a steady heart. The wind tugged at Lorraine Bell's hoodie as she stepped out of Hope Roast Cafe, the warm scent of cinnamon still clinging to her paper cup. Her arms were full coffee in one hand, a grocery bag balanced against her hip, and a loaf of bread barely hanging on in the crook of her elbow. The streets of Charlotte were alive with rustling leaves and murmurs of early November cars honking shoes tapping pavement. People bundled in scarves and chasing the last golden threads of sunlight before the evening settled in. Trade Street was always busy around this time, and Lorraine usually moved fast to get home before dark. Jordan would be hungry and already texting her silly memes. She smiled to herself, thinking of his goofy grin, and adjusted the bag before taking her first careful sip of coffee. Then she saw it. At first it looked like someone kneeling, or maybe tying a shoe. But the man was motionless, crumpled near the edge of the crosswalk, one hand open, the other curled against his chest. He wasn't old, maybe mid-30s, dressed in a navy jacket and scuffed jeans. His head tilted toward the curb, and his body seemed folded into itself, like a puppet dropped without warning. People kept walking. A woman glanced and pulled her coat tighter. A man with earbuds stepped around the body, like it was just another pile of trash the city hadn't swept up. Lorraine stood frozen for a breath, then another. Her fingers tightened around the grocery bag. Her coffee sloshed. "Come on," she whispered to herself, heart beating fast. "Don't just stand here." She dropped everything. The groceries hit the sidewalk with a soft thump, apples rolling out a can clanking against the curb. The coffee spilled sideways, steam curling upward. Lorraine ran to the man and crouched beside him, knees catching on the concrete. She touched his neck first, then his wrist. No watch, no wallet in sight. But his skin was warm, pulse there, but faint. "Sir," she said, "can you hear me?" No response. Her CNA training flooded back details she hadn't used in months. Tilt the head. Check for breath. Nothing. Chest compressions, it had been a while, but her hands remembered. She placed one hand over the other and began to push, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. People started watching now from a distance. No one stepped forward. Some pulled out phones but didn't call. Inside the cafe, Clyde leaned across the counter, watching through the window. He was already reaching for the landline. "Yeah, I need an ambulance," he said calmly. "Corner of Trade and McDowell. Man collapsed. Woman's doing CPR. Yeah, she knows what she's doing. Hurry." Lorraine kept pushing. Her palms ached, her shoulders burned. The man's head bobbed with each compression, dark hair falling into his face. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. There was something familiar about him, but maybe it was just the way his brow creased, or how heavy he looked, like someone carrying too much. A pen rolled out from inside his coat pocket. She noticed it between compressions. It caught a sliver of sunlight, gold-trimmed deep green lacquer with a small engraved GE at the clip. She didn't stop to wonder. She just kept counting. The siren came like a flood. 2 paramedics ran across the street, kneeling beside her. One took over compressions, the other pulled out oxygen. "You can step back now, ma'am," one of them said, glancing at her. She nodded, hands trembling as she sat back on her heels. Her palms were red and scraped. She wiped them on her burgundy hoodie without thinking, just trying to feel the warmth of the fabric. Something familiar. One of the paramedics looked up. "Hey, don't I know you? You used to work at Bellevue Care, right?" Lorraine blinked, surprised. "Yeah, couple years back. You kept cool. Nice work." She gave a tired smile, then watched as they lifted the man onto the stretcher. He still hadn't opened his eyes. No ID, no phone, just that fancy pen. They slid into a plastic evidence bag. The crowd was already starting to move again. One man muttered something about traffic. Another asked if the cafe was still open. Lorraine stood slowly. Her groceries were scattered. Someone had stepped on the bread. The coffee cup lay sideways, soaked into the sidewalk. Clyde stepped out of the cafe and handed her a napkin. "Most folks just walk past," he said, voice rough from years of military and espresso. "You didn't." "You." She took the napkin, wiping her palms again, even though they were already clean. "Didn't feel like a choice." He nodded once. You got heart, girl. That's rarer than gold in this town. She bent to gather what she could. 2 apples, the crushed bread, the can of soup, with a dent now, but left the coffee. The pen, she noticed, was already gone. As the ambulance pulled away, a young journalist across the street raised her phone. Click. Lorraine turned her back before the flash could catch her face. Lorraine crossed the last block to her apartment as the sky shifted from amber to a moody indigo. The breeze had picked up, and she tugged her hoodie tighter around herself. It was worn and soft from too many washes, burgundy with a faded logo she could no longer read. The sleeves still carried faint stains. She pressed one against her side, hiding the worst of it. She didn't want to explain. The apartment building on Beatty's Ford Road stood tired and quiet, just like the neighborhood. The hallway lights flickered as she climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. From behind their front door, Jordan's voice echoed. He was talking back to the TV again. Some animated show about a teen detective who always wore mismatched sneakers. She could hear the canned laughter through the door. She opened it slowly. Jordan looked up from the couch. Long limbs sprawled, one sock half off a bowl of cereal in his lap, even though it was nearly dinner time. His face brightened when he saw her, then his eyes narrowed at her hoodie. "You're late," he said, pointing with his spoon. "And you look like someone ran you over with a grocery cart." Lorraine dropped the dented soup can on the counter and exhaled. "I had a weird day." Jordan tilted his head like a puppy. "How weird?" "On a scale from, I saw a guy dressed as Spider-Man doing karaoke to, I accidentally saved someone's life." She opened the fridge, stalling. Half a jug of milk, 2 slices of cold pizza, a bag of spinach that had given up 3 days ago. "I don't want to talk about it," which means it's definitely the second one. He got up, walked over, and leaned his head against her arm. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Lorraine smiled at that. Ever since their mom passed 3 years ago, he'd grown more intuitive, more protective. Only 13, but some days he felt like her older brother. She ruffled his hair. "Just a guy on the street, passed out cold. No one was helping. I did what I could." Jordan blinked. "Did he make it?" "They took him in an ambulance. That's all I know." He was quiet, watching her carefully. She walked over to the laundry nook beside the bathroom, peeled off her hoodie, and shoved it into the hamper beneath some old towels. The scent of fabric softener barely masked the blood. In the kitchen, Jordan was already pouring the last of the cereal into a bowl. "You're not going to get famous for this, are you?" Lorraine gave him a look. "I mean," he continued between bites, "if someone took a video and it goes viral, we might need to move. You know? Before people start asking you to do CPR on their dogs or something." "No video," she said, though she wasn't totally sure. "Just a blurry photo, maybe." That's how all the great origin stories start. Blurry photo, local hero, mystery man, boom, Netflix deal. She couldn't help laughing. Later that night, after Jordan had finally fallen asleep with his socks still on and the remote somewhere under his pillow, Lorraine sat at the kitchen table, phone face down beside a cooling cup of tea. She stared at her scraped palms. The skin was raw pink and tender, but the trembling had stopped. She thought about this man's face again. Not the collapse, not the weight of his chest beneath her hands, but his expression. Even unconscious, he looked not fragile exactly, but human, tired, worn, like someone who didn't ask for help because he didn't know how. She pulled the hoodie from the hamper. The stain on the sleeve was darker now. She stared at it, thumb brushing the edge, and whispered, "I hope you wake up wherever you are." Then she folded it inside out and stuffed it into a plastic bag, tying the top tight. In the dim light, she sat with her tea until it went cold. The next morning, Lorraine awoke to the familiar creak of the radiator and the distant rhythm of the garbage trucks groaning down the street. November light filtered in through the thin curtains, soft, pale, not quite warm. She sat up slowly, the weight of the previous day still heavy in her chest. In the kitchen, Jordan was already awake, leaning over the counter, with a pencil tucked behind his ear and a comic book cracked open beneath his elbow. He looked up and grinned. "You snore," he said by way of greeting. She poured herself a mug of coffee, black and too bitter, then leaned against the sink. He peered at her cautiously. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some," she murmured. "You want eggs?" He shrugged. We got eggs. She chuckled despite herself and turned to open the fridge. The carton held 3, maybe 4 left, enough for a scramble. As the skillet warmed, Lorraine found herself glancing at the laundry nook. The plastic bag with her hoodie was still there, tucked under the detergent like a secret. She hadn't decided whether to throw it away or wash it alone when Jordan wasn't home. "Hey," Jordan said suddenly. "Did you see this?" He turned his tablet around, revealing a grainy image on the screen. Somebody posted this on the Charlotte community page. Lorraine squinted. The picture was fuzzy, taken from across the street, angled just enough to show her crouched over the man on the sidewalk, her hair falling forward, hoodie bunched at the elbows. You couldn't see her face clearly. Just a blur of motion. But it was her. Beneath it the caption read, "Some woman helped a man who collapsed on trade. Didn't get her name. Whoever you are, thank you." There were dozens of comments. People speculating, some thanking the mystery helper, a few arguing whether it had been a publicity stunt. She handed the tablet back to Jordan. "You're kind of famous," he said, half proud, half amused. "Only if people squint real hard." He looked thoughtful for a second. "You think the guy's okay?" "I don't know," she answered, plating the eggs, "but I hope so." Later that day, while Jordan was at school, Lorraine walked past the Hope Roast Cafe again. She didn't plan to, but her feet led her there anyway. Clyde stood behind the counter as usual, polishing mugs and watching the world with the calm of a man who'd seen more than he spoke about. He looked up when she walked in. "Well, if it isn't Miss Don't Look Away." She gave him a small smile. "I just came for coffee." "Mm-hmm," he said, pouring a fresh cup without asking. "On the house. For bravery." She slid a few dollars across the counter anyway. It wasn't brave, just what anybody should do. He took the bills but held her gaze. "You'd be surprised how many don't." A pause stretched between them. There was something Clyde added, reaching beneath the register. "Found this on the ground after the ambulance left." He handed her a pen, sleek heavy, the kind you could tell was expensive just by holding it. A single letter was engraved near the clip, G.E. Lorraine turned it over slowly in her hand. It must have fallen from his coat. "Thought you might want to keep it until he comes looking for it." She nodded, slipping it into her pocket. Back at home, she placed the pen on the windowsill beside her tiny collection of trinkets, an old music box from her mom, a seashell from a forgotten vacation, a Polaroid of Jordan eating spaghetti with his hands. That night, she and Jordan curled up on the couch with bowls of canned chili. The heating clanked rhythmically, and the city hummed just beyond the glass. He looked over at her between bites. "So, you saved a stranger today?" Lorraine let the silence stretch for a second, then said softly, "Yeah, but I don't think he'll remember." She didn't expect applause, but she didn't expect a warning letter either. The clinic's lobby smelled like antiseptic and reheated plastic, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes even after a full shift. Lorraine clocked in 5 minutes early, same as always. Badge clipped neat to her scrubs, smile ready even if the muscles behind it were tired. Uptown Charlotte buzzed outside with pre-holiday cheer, but inside these walls everything felt cold and humming under fluorescent light. As she walked past the nurse's station, a few heads turned. Some offered polite nods, others just stared a second too long. Lorraine didn't flinch. She kept her pace steady even when she caught a familiar, grainy clip playing on someone's phone near the blood pressure station. A woman's voice, chirpy with morning news cadence, floated through the air. An unidentified woman seen administering CPR near Trade Street yesterday afternoon. Locals are calling her a good Samaritan. The angle was shaky. The video itself barely showed her face, but that burgundy hoodie with its frayed hem and worn elbows was unmistakable. Lorraine paused just long enough to hear a soft snicker behind her. "She's famous now," someone whispered, and then another voice, Tasha's unmistakable, in its sugary tone, said, "Guess we know who's ready for her 15 minutes. Lorraine didn't turn around. She headed straight to the break room. The staff fridge buzzed with neglect, its front cluttered with curling flyers announcing the upcoming Thanksgiving potluck. "Sign up to bring a dish," one said in red marker. Below it, someone had scribbled, "No raisins in the mac and cheese. We're begging." Lorraine set her lunch bag on the shelf like always. turkey sandwich, apple slices, and a granola bar for later. Before she could leave, her name echoed from down the hall. Lorraine, Mrs. Dorsey would like to see you. She nodded and smoothed her scrub top as she walked. Mrs. Dorsey's office was glass and chrome with a single plant in the corner that always looked on the verge of giving up. The woman herself sat behind the desk, posture perfect, smile tight. Her glasses were perched low enough to suggest concern, but not so low that she looked unprofessional. "Come in, Lorraine. Sit down." Lorraine sat. "I'll keep this brief." Mrs. Dorsey began, folding her hands. "First, I want to say we all admire initiative and community spirit. Truly." However, she said the word like it tasted sour. "We do have policies regarding employee conduct outside of clinic hours, especially when it involves medical intervention." Lorraine blinked. "You mean the man on the sidewalk?" "Yes." The story made the rounds rather quickly. "Your face isn't visible, but your hoodie certainly is. We've had questions. I didn't identify myself. I didn't say I was acting as a representative of the clinic. Be that as it may," Mrs. Dorsey said, with a measured smile, sliding a paper across the desk. "This is just a reminder. A friendly one. But it will be documented." Lorraine stared at the page. It was worded carefully, liability language dressed up in civility. While the clinic values civic action, employees are advised to refrain from unauthorized medical conduct outside of scheduled duties. Her fingers curled on her lap. "So next time I should walk away." "I didn't say that," Mrs. Dorsey replied, tone syrupy and sharp at once. "But perhaps consider calling 911 and waiting for professionals. After all, we wouldn't want you or the clinic to face unnecessary risk." Lorraine signed the form. Back in the hallway, the walls felt narrower. Tasha was by the vending machine, shaking a bottle of sparkling water. She looked up with a bright smile. "Hey, hero. You get your cape pressed this morning." Lorraine didn't answer. Tasha leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I get it. Some folks need to feel seen. Just don't let this little fame thing distract you. We've got real work here." Lorraine walked away before she said something she'd regret. In the restroom, she turned on the tap and let the water run until it steamed. She washed her hands longer than usual, past the wrist, even over her knuckles. Not because they were dirty, but because she needed the motion, the warmth, something to hold her steady. The mirror reflected her face back at her. Still tired, still hers. She dried her hands, slowly tossed the paper towel, and stepped out into the hallway again. Lorraine stepped back into the hallway, just as the mail cart clattered past, pushed by a nursing student with earbuds in and a clipboard balanced on her forearm. Lorraine didn't make eye contact. She didn't feel like having to smile. At the nurse's station, someone had left a half-eaten bagel on a napkin, cream cheese congealing in the middle. A screen behind the desk still played local news on mute. The clip from yesterday had cycled into a segment about weather rain expected by Friday, but the banner across the bottom still read Good Samaritan Mystery in Uptown. In the break room, Lorraine poured herself a cup of decaf from the half-empty pot. It tasted like cardboard, but the ritual grounded her. She sat at the tiny table, tucked in the corner, took a slow sip, and pulled out her phone. Not to scroll, but just to hold something in her hand that didn't feel like judgment. The door creaked open. Tasha walked in, balancing a yogurt and a packet of almonds. She saw Lorraine and grinned. "Hey," Lorraine nodded back. "You know," Tasha began, stirring her yogurt, "when I saw the clip, I thought, wow, Lorraine's really out here trying to be Florence Nightingale?" She giggled, then took a bite. "That's cute." Lorraine looked at her. "It wasn't about being cute." Tasha shrugged. "I mean, sure. But girl, don't be surprised if this place doesn't clap for it. Liability, reputation, it's a whole mess. You know how tight Mrs. Dorsey is about PR." She leaned against the counter like they were girlfriends gossiping instead of two women on opposite sides of an invisible fence. "Besides," Tasha added, "some folks are saying it looked kind of staged. I mean, who just collapses like that in the middle of the street with a photographer around?" Lorraine's hand tightened around the coffee cup. "I didn't stage anything." Tasha blinked, mock surprised. "Oh, honey, I didn't say you did. Just, you know how the internet is." She tossed her spoon into the trash and waltzed out like nothing had landed heavy. Lorraine sat still for a long moment. Her stomach was tight. The clinic suddenly felt more sterile than usual, as if the walls themselves were holding back their opinions. She glanced down at her fingertips, still dry from overwashing, and exhaled. Around lunchtime, Clyde arrived. She spotted him through the front window as he stepped into the lobby, wiping his boots on the mat. He had a paper coffee cup in one hand and a small envelope in the other. His coat was thick and tan, patched at the elbows, and his gait held the rhythm of the old joints, making peace with age. Lorraine met him halfway. "Well, hey there, baby girl," he said, offering the cup with a warm smile. "Brought you the good stuff. Ain't no clinic coffee gonna do you right." She accepted it with both hands. "Thank you." Clyde glanced around. "Place still colder than a tax collector's handshake, I see." She laughed softly. "Colder than that." He handed her the envelope next. "From one of my regulars. Said to pass it to the woman with the steady hands. It's just a thank you note." Lorraine slipped it into her pocket. She didn't want to read it here. Clyde lowered his voice and leaned in slightly. "I know they probably got all kinds of sideways things to say about what you did. Folks love rules more than decency these days. But don't let the cold world freeze your heart, baby girl." She looked up, and for a second something tightened in her chest. "You think I did the right thing?" Clyde tilted his head. "A man was dying on the sidewalk, and you bent down when no one else would. Ain't nothing wrong with that?" He smiled softer now. "People like us, we keep on pushing. That's all." Before he left, he hummed under his breath, low and warm, the opening notes of an old gospel tune. "Keep on pushing. Can't stop now." Lorraine held the coffee close for the rest of the shift. The warmth felt real in a way nothing else did today. That evening after work, she picked up a to-go box from the diner across the street, fried chicken, collard greens, and 2 soft dinner rolls because cooking felt like too much. At home, Jordan was sitting cross-legged on the floor, headphones in, sorting through a stack of Scrabble tiles. "Hope you're hungry," she called. He glanced up. "Starving." They ate on the couch, legs tucked under blankets. The TV played an old episode of Family Feud, and Lorraine let herself laugh as Jordan shouted wrong answers at the screen. Afterward, they pulled the coffee table closer and started a new Scrabble game. Lorraine played quiet on her first turn. Jordan followed with bold. "You okay?" he asked casually, rearranging his tiles. Lorraine considered lying. It was a weird day. People still being dumb about that video. Something like that. Jordan looked at her, then sharp and sure, in a way only 13-year-olds could be. "They're just mad you did the right thing without needing a reason." She smiled. "You sound like someone's been reading too many superhero comics." "I'm just observant," he said with a shrug. Then he spelled hero with a triple-word score. The next morning, Lorraine woke early, long before her alarm. The sky outside was still ink dark, and the heater let out a clunky hum from the corner vent. Jordan's door was closed, and the apartment was quiet in that fragile way it only managed before sunrise. She padded into the small kitchen, started the coffee, and opened the envelope Clyde had handed her the day before. It was a folded piece of cardstock, plain ivory, with no return name. Inside, someone had written in neat blue ink, "I don't know who you are, but you stopped when no one else did. That matters more than you'll ever know." There was no signature, just a simple heart drawn next to the final sentence. Lorraine set it down slowly. She didn't realize how much she'd needed someone to say that until it was already in her hands. Later at the clinic, the rhythm of the day tried to pull her back into routine. Vitals chart updates, medication runs. The usual bustle filled the halls like static, predictable, familiar, almost comforting. But she noticed it more now. The way 2 nurses paused their conversation when she walked by. The way her name didn't appear on the volunteer sign-up sheet for the Thanksgiving drive, even though she had offered to bring sweet potato pie. Even the way her badge seemed to get an extra glance at the security desk. Small things, not loud enough to complain about, but steady enough to feel. At lunchtime, she sat alone in the break room. Her sandwich tasted like cardboard again. Halfway through the hour, she got up to refill her water and walked past the open staff room, normally locked unless you had admin clearance. The door was slightly ajar. She didn't mean to stop, but voices drifted from inside. "Just saying, if she's got all that Good Samaritan energy, maybe she should be working in the ER, not here. Did you see the way she looked when she got that warning? Like she wanted to cry? So dramatic. A short laugh. Or maybe next time let the guy stay down. Lorraine backed away before they could see her. Her feet carried her down the hallway into the restroom, where she locked the door behind her and leaned against it for a long moment. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't angry, not exactly, just hollow, like all the good she tried to hold on to had slipped through her fingers before she could even explain why she cared. She turned on the faucet and splashed her face. The cold water stung her eyelids, but it grounded her. She stared into the mirror again. Same tired eyes, same quiet resolve beneath them. That night she left work a few minutes early. The sun had already dipped behind the buildings and the sidewalks were quiet. Holiday lights blinked in department store windows, reds and golds, hopeful and soft, but they didn't lift her mood. She walked briskly, grocery bags swinging in one hand, keys in the other. As she turned down her street, a strange stillness settled over her. It wasn't the silence she was used to that in this neighborhood. It was the subtle difference in air pressure, like the quiet was watching her instead of just being there. Then she heard it, the soft purr of an engine behind her. Not loud, not aggressive, just trailing. She turned her head casually and spotted it sleek and black. The kind of car that didn't belong on this block. Tinted windows, no headlights. It was crawling slowly, one house back, the tires moving like breath. Lorraine gripped her keys tighter. Her heartbeat kicked up. She turned onto her walkway, stepped up to her porch, and pretended she wasn't looking. But from the edge of her vision, she saw it. The car paused across the street, idling, watching. She didn't wait to see more. She got inside, quickly bolted the door, and peeked through the curtain. The car was gone. Jordan came out of his room a minute later, rubbing his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. Lorraine turned, gave him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, just long day." He nodded. "Want to play a quick round of Scrabble before bed?" "Sure," she said, forcing a lighter tone. "But I'm warning you, I've got a vengeance word lined up." He grinned and disappeared to grab the board. As she moved to the kitchen, she glanced out the window again. Nothing there, but her skin still prickled. Jordan returned with the game and placed it on the table. As he sorted the tiles, he asked without looking up, "So, you saved a stranger today?" Lorraine paused, the memory of the warning letter still fresh. The sound of muffled laughter from behind staff doors. The cold stillness of the car across the street. She sat down, tucked a piece of hair behind her ear, and nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said almost to herself, "but I don't think he'll remember." The man she saved was not only alive, he was on every billboard downtown. Lorraine stood still in front of the electronics store window, clutching her canvas tote. The cold wind pushed gently at her back, urging her forward, but she didn't move. Every screen behind the glass 6 TVs lined up like a choir flashed the same headline in bold: "Billionaire Ellison recovers after mysterious collapse." There he was, clearer now than in the blur of memory. Same sharp jawline, same dark eyes, but more alert. Still recovering, the anchor said, but responsive. Walking again, expected to make a statement soon. She blinked. A man stepped around her on the sidewalk, muttering something about tourists. Lorraine barely noticed. Her hand dipped into her pocket and closed around the edge of a folded grocery list, fingertips suddenly cold. It couldn't be him, or rather it could, but it shouldn't. She had felt the weight of his chest under her palms, heard the silence before his breath returned. There had been no security, no assistant, no limo. Just a man crumpled on the sidewalk, like a stranger nobody wanted to see. And now he was everywhere. She crossed the street slowly, eyes unfocused. At the crosswalk, someone honked and she flinched. The wind picked up, tugging at the hem of her coat. She needed to keep moving. Jordan's school bus would be arriving in less than an hour, and she had promised him leftover peach cobbler from Clyde's Cafe. At work, it was impossible to ignore. People clustered around the staff lounge TV like bees to a hive. Lorraine slipped in quietly, hoping to clock in without drawing attention. But the moment she stepped through the door, someone turned the volume up. "He was out cold for like 2 hours," a nurse said, shaking her head. "And no one knows why he collapsed." "Stress," maybe another offered. "He's a billionaire. Can't be easy." Lorraine moved past them quickly, heart thudding harder than it should have. She needed to focus. There were patients waiting, charts to update. The world hadn't changed, not really. Only now she knew the man's name. Grant Ellison. She found herself whispering it just once in the supply closet while reaching for gauze packs. The syllables felt odd in her mouth, too big, too distant, like saying Mount Everest when all you meant to do was climb a hill. That evening, Jordan was already on the couch, one sock halfway off backpack, flung open beside him. His tablet sat on his lap, eyes wide. Lorraine. You won't believe who you saved. She dropped her keys on the counter. You've been on that thing all afternoon. He pointed to the screen like it was a treasure map. Grant Ellison. He's got like 4 companies. Tech stuff. His face is on my science book. She smiled faintly. That's surprising. He was married, Jordan added, frowning. His wife died a few years ago. Emergency room thing. She didn't get treated fast enough. Lorraine paused. The microwave beeped behind her, but she didn't move to open it. Jordan kept scrolling. He stopped doing interviews after that. People say he kind of disappeared. Like on purpose. She took a deep breath, walked over and ruffled his hair. All right, CSI. Let's eat before your brain explodes from research. Later that night, she stood in front of the dryer, folding laundry in small, neat squares. The burgundy hoodie came last. She held it longer than she meant to. Creased fabric, faded sleeves, faint trace of coffee still lingering on the cuff. There were no news headlines stitched into it. No headlines announcing heroism, just warmth. She folded it slowly like it mattered. Clyde was already polishing the counter when Grant walked into Hope Roast Cafe 2 days later. The bell over the door gave its usual gentle chime, and Clyde didn't look up right away. The morning rush had just passed, and the place had that calm lull jazz humming from the speaker's sunlight, slicing through the blinds, the scent of cinnamon rolls lingering in the air. Grant's shoes were clean but worn. His coat wasn't the tailored kind, just gray and functional. He moved with a slight hesitance, as if unsure of what belonged to him and what didn't. Clyde finally looked up and froze for half a second, his hand still mid-wipe over a ceramic mug. Then he smiled, slow and knowing, not surprised so much as quietly amused. You looking for something? Clyde asked. Grant stepped forward and glanced toward the cork bulletin board near the sugar station. Flyers for community art night, a babysitting ad with rainbow markers, a missing tabby cat. His voice was low, almost embarrassed. I'm looking for the woman in the burgundy hoodie. Clyde didn't blink. He set the mug down and leaned slightly on the counter. Lot of hoodies come through here. I know, Grant said, offering the ghost of a smile. But this one. She didn't look away. Clyde reached beneath the counter and pulled out a cup. Coffee. Sure. Clyde poured it slowly. Steam curling upward. Cream or sugar? Just black. Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment. Grant held the cup with both hands, like it anchored him to the room. She didn't want her name in the paper, Clyde said after a beat. Didn't even want a free refill. Just helped and walked on. I figured as much, Grant said. That's why I'm not here to ask for her name. Clyde nodded once, then turned to wipe down a nearby table. As he moved, his voice drifted back over his shoulder. You remind me of someone. 10-15 years ago. You used to get coffee delivered to Ellison Tower, black 2 sugars. Grant looked surprised. You remember that? I remember faces, especially ones that don't make eye contact with the delivery guy. Grant chuckled under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck. I wasn't exactly grounded back then. Clyde came back behind the counter. Well, seems like life gave you a good shove. Most folks, when they get knocked down like that, they disappear. I almost did. But you didn't. Grant met his eyes, then level open, because someone reached down. There was another beat of quiet. Clyde didn't press further. He just nodded toward the bulletin board. If you want to leave a note, pin's in the jar. Grant hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded square of thick ivory paper, the same kind Lorraine had received anonymously days ago. Clyde watched, unreadable, as Grant walked over, slid the pin through the top edge, and pressed it into the cork. He stood there a moment longer, staring at the small message. Thank you for not looking away. No names, no pressure. Then, without another word, Grant turned to go. But just as he reached the door, he noticed a crumpled napkin on the floor, someone else's. He bent down, picked it up, and tossed it in the trash bin by the door before stepping out. Clyde didn't say anything. He just smiled slow and thoughtful. Back at Lorraine's apartment, the afternoon light poured through the living room blinds like molasses. Jordan was sitting on the rug, sorting through old art supplies. He had a glue stick in one hand and a torn sketchbook in the other. "Lorraine," he called. "Look what I found." She stepped out of the bathroom, wiping her hands on a towel. "If it's that glitter slime again, it's going straight to the trash." "No," he said, laughing. "Better." He held up a wrinkled piece of notebook paper. On it, a childish drawing in faded colored pencil. Stick figures clouds a giant red helicopter labeled Rescue Nurse Lorraine. The girl figure had a cape and a big smile. Lorraine blinked. "Oh, wow. I forgot all about that. You made me call you Captain L. Remember? I did not. You made me salute." She laughed soft and real this time and sat beside him. "I guess I always wanted to help people even back then." Jordan looked at her seriously. "You did help someone. A really big someone." Lorraine looked away, folding the drawing carefully. "Yeah, but I didn't do it for who he was." "I know." He leaned against her shoulder. "That's why it matters more." Outside, the wind picked up swirling leaves across the sidewalk. A car engine passed by, just ordinary this time. Nothing sleek or slow. But inside that cafe on 3rd Street, a note still fluttered gently on the bulletin board, waiting to be seen. Lorraine didn't notice the note until 3 days later. She wasn't planning to stop by Hope Rose Cafe that evening, just passing through after picking up Jordan's dry erase markers from the supply store. But the windows were glowing warm against the fading sky, and she could already hear Clyde's low voice humming through the glass. Something familiar and old, maybe Bill Withers. She pushed the door open with her shoulder bell chiming soft. Clyde didn't say anything at first, just gave her that half smile and a chin nod. "Evening, baby girl." "Evening," she returned, exhaling a little. Her coat smelled like cold air and lemon soap. "Got anything left from the cinnamon batch?" He motioned to the case. "2. Both got your name on 'em." She smiled, dropped a few coins in the tip jar, more habit than thought, and made her way to the sugar station, while Clyde boxed up her treats. That's when she saw it. Pinned neatly to the corner of the corkboard between a flyer for free piano lessons and a lost keys notice with a cartoon drawing was a square of thick ivory paper, handwritten sharp but clean. "Thank you for not looking away. No names, no pressure." Her heart skipped once, then twice. She didn't touch it, just stared, palms warming around her coffee cup. Her breath slowed as the implications settled. He knew, and more than that, he cared enough to come back. Lorraine didn't ask Clyde about the note. Didn't have to. She just glanced over, and he was already watching her eyes, knowing but kind. "You ever seen a man pick up someone else's trash and make it look like gospel?" he said quietly. She tilted her head, surprised. "You're talking about him." Clyde only shrugged. "Actions say more than press conferences, baby." Outside, the wind rattled the door slightly. Lorraine took her coffee to the bench near the window, sat down and let the warmth soak into her hands. She didn't read the note again, but the words pulsed in her memory like a heartbeat. No names, no pressure, but somehow it still carried weight. She took the long way home. By the time she reached their apartment, the hallway lights flickered as usual, and Jordan's sneakers were by the door, laces knotted into something between art and accident. The smell of microwave popcorn clung faintly to the air. He looked up from the kitchen table, mouth half full of trail mix. "You got the markers?" Lorraine tossed the bag on the table. And a surprise. Cinnamon buns. Jordan whooped, then paused. "Wait from Hope Roast." "Yup." "Clyde said anything weird?" Lorraine poured herself some water and leaned against the counter. "Define weird." He blinked, then narrowed his eyes playfully. "Like, Billionaire leaves secret message on community board. Weird." She gave him a look. "You've been reading too many thrillers." He smirked but didn't push. "I know you don't want to make it a big deal." "It's not," she said softly. But she didn't sound convinced even to herself. That night, after Jordan went to bed, Lorraine sat at the small kitchen table with her phone dim low. She didn't open social media or the news. Instead, she stared at the lock screen for a while, her thumb hovering, but never pressing. She wasn't scared, just suspended, like she'd stepped into a room and forgotten why she entered. The man she saved was Grant Ellison. She had seen him nearly lifeless, had pressed her hands over his rib cage, counting compressions in her head like a prayer, had wiped her palms on her sleeve and said nothing to anyone afterward. And now he had written something. Not to the world, but to her. Maybe it was nothing. A thank you note with poetic flair. But maybe, just maybe, it was more. A few days later, as she walked Jordan to the school bus stop, the air was crisp and bright. Kids ran ahead with backpacks bouncing, and parents stood with coffee mugs and tired smiles. Jordan paused halfway down the block. Hey, Lorraine? Remember that scholarship contest you entered forever ago? Lorraine narrowed her eyes. What about it? He pulled out his phone and tapped frantically. Look. She took the phone, frowning. On the screen was a PDF attachment from an official-looking email, Health and Hope Foundation. Community scholarship announcement. She scrolled down slowly. There was only one name, recipient Lorraine Bell. She blinked. Jordan bounced beside her. That's you. You're the only one on the list. But I didn't. She started, then stopped. The application had been submitted months ago. A long shot, really. She barely remembered mailing it in with a handwritten cover letter and a prayer. She looked around, sunlight dappling the pavement, kids yelling, dogs barking somewhere in the distance. And suddenly, she didn't feel suspended anymore. There was gravity again, direction. A breeze lifted her hair as the bus pulled up, and Jordan jumped on, waving with two hands. Lorraine waved back, still holding the phone in the other. Somewhere not far, someone had pressed a pin into a corkboard, had picked up a napkin not theirs, had remembered her, not out of guilt, not for show. Just because she didn't look away, he offered her a favor. She gave him silence. The first morning it happened, Lorraine thought it was a mistake. Maybe one of the instructors had miscounted supplies or upgraded the kits for everyone. But as she took her seat at the edge of the third row, same spot every Tuesday and Thursday, she saw the gleaming new lab case placed neatly on her desk, complete with her initials etched in delicate silver on the zipper pull. She froze. It was the kind of kit student nurses drooled over, ergonomic handles, digital thermometer with auto-calibrate scalpels still sealed in double sterile wrap. Most of them were scraping by with hand-me-downs and taped-up cases from eBay. Lorraine glanced around the room, expecting to see another one on Tasha Green's desk. If anyone deserved surprise luxuries, it was always Tasha. But no. Everyone else had the standard gray nylon kits with faded logos and peeling Velcro. Lorraine opened the case carefully. Every instrument gleamed. No note inside, no card, just tools, clean, sharp, and expensive. Tasha was already watching. You got a sponsor or something, she asked, flipping her shiny ponytail back with a little too much flair. Looks fancy. Lorraine didn't look up. It was just here. Oh. Tasha's voice lifted with sugar. Must be nice. Some of us actually pay our way. Lorraine's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Sterling Community College wasn't a place of luxury. It was where second chances lived. Lorraine had fought tooth and nail for every quiz, every practicum, every night shift she balanced with studying. And now a silent gift was casting shadows over all of it. Professor McHenry walked in before the murmurs grew, and class began with the usual lecture on cardiac rhythms. Lorraine took notes quietly, trying not to feel the weight of the upgraded kit at her elbow. She wrote fast, like always tight slanted cursive, that her brother joked looked like someone running away. By lunchtime, whispers had reached the back hallway. She's got a rich boyfriend, someone muttered behind the vending machines. Nah, probably some white doctor trying to look good, another voice chimed. Lorraine didn't bother correcting anyone. Let them talk. Her life wasn't a headline, and she wasn't about to start giving press conferences in the break room. That evening, she stopped by Hope Roast for a small chai and a quiet corner. Clyde had just mopped the floors and was rearranging the sugar packets like it mattered. You okay, baby girl? He asked without looking up. She nodded. Just long day. He gave her a cup on the house and wiped his hands on his apron. Long days don't last. Strong folks do. She smiled faintly. Clyde tilted his head. Got someone looking for you again. Lorraine stiffened. He noticed. Didn't give out your name. You know me better. She exhaled. Did he leave anything? Just a card. I slipped it in your box. Her stomach dropped slightly. She didn't check it until she got home. Their apartment mailbox was rusted, barely hanging onto its hinges. She had to jiggle the key to get it open. Inside, wedged between the electricity bill and a flyer for pest control, was a small cream-colored envelope with no stamp and no name. She opened it on the stairs. Inside, a single card. Heavy cardstock. Simple type. "You matter." That was it. No return address, no signature. Lorraine held it for a second, then let her fingers tighten, folding it cleanly down the center before dropping it into the outside trash bin with one practiced motion. Her hands still smelled faintly like antiseptic wipes. Back inside, Jordan was assembling something strange with toothpicks and gumdrops. "School project?" she asked. "Architecture," he said, grinning. "Also boredom." She ruffled his hair and tried to smile. "By the way," he said, glancing over, "if this were a movie, he'd totally fall in love with the woman who saved his life." Lorraine laughed. "That only happens on TV." But the laugh didn't quite reach her eyes. She went to bed early that night, the unopened utility bill still on the kitchen counter, and the cold November wind sliding under the apartment windows like an unwelcome thought. The next morning, Lorraine arrived early to the lab, hoping to beat the whispers. But the room was already half full, and Tasha was holding court by the whiteboard like a peacock in scrubs. "She says she doesn't know who sent it," Tasha was saying to another classmate, voice low, but not low enough. "But come on, that thing costs more than our tuition." Lorraine kept her eyes down, moved to her usual seat, and pulled out her notes. The new kit sat unopened in her tote. She didn't want to touch it again, not today. Professor McHenry started class with a clinical case scenario. Lorraine took comfort in the structure: heart rates, oxygen, saturation levels, patient history. Numbers didn't gossip. Graphs didn't speculate. When class ended, she lingered behind to ask about rescheduling her next practicum. "You can't change the system's schedule," Professor McHenry said, but his tone softened. "Unless there's a real emergency?" She shook her head. "Just juggling some hours." He paused, studying her. "You're one of the sharpest in the cohort," he said. "Whatever you're doing, keep your focus. Don't let noise from the hallways get in your way." She nodded quietly. Outside the building, a thin drizzle had started. Lorraine zipped her coat and turned toward the bus stop, passing the student bulletin board along the corridor. New flyers were layered over old ones: study groups, blood drives, and a big notice for the Thanksgiving canned food competition. She stopped. A small white card was pinned near the top. No logo, no bold font, just 5 words in plain type. "Some gifts aren't owed back." Her heart thudded once hard. She didn't reach for it, just kept walking. That afternoon, Clyde wiped down his counter as Grant Ellison walked in again, understated in a charcoal jacket and no entourage. He looked more rested this time, though there was a quiet behind his eyes that hadn't softened. "Still no name?" he asked, voice low. Clyde didn't even glance up. "Still not my story to tell." Grant gave a small nod and took a seat by the window. He didn't order anything. "Listen," Clyde said, eventually setting down his rag. "I get that you got resources, and maybe you want to use them to say thanks. But that girl, she ain't one to take flowers over roots. She's the kind that plants her own garden." Grant looked out the window. "Then maybe I'll just water the sidewalk." Later that evening, Lorraine sat at the kitchen table, hunched over her presentation slides. Her solo project on geriatric care was due next week, and since no group had invited her in, she built it alone, slide by slide, voiceover by voiceover. She was used to the work. Jordan patted in with socks on and a bowl of cereal. "You're working again?" he asked. "I'm almost done." He sat down across from her and peeked at the screen. "Is that the lady who talks to dogs?" Lorraine smiled. "No, that's a specialist in dementia care. She just dresses freely." Jordan munched his cereal and shrugged. "Looks like a cartoon grandma." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that softened the edges of the day. By the time she submitted the final edit, it was nearly midnight. She folded laundry in the dim yellow light of their kitchen, sorting her faded scrubs from Jordan's mismatched socks. The burgundy hoodie went last, wash folded, and set back on the chair like armor retired. The porch light flickered once. She frowned. It had been broken for weeks, shorted out from a thunderstorm. She hadn't touched it. The landlord hadn't either. She stepped outside. The bulb glowed steadily now, soft, warm, new. Lorraine stood under it, chilled, not from the cold, but from something else. Her eyes scanned the quiet street. No one in sight. Inside, Jordan glanced up from the couch, where he was half asleep with a blanket. "Porch light works," he mumbled. She leaned against the doorframe. "Must have been Mr. Nobody," he added with a sleepy grin. She didn't smile back. A few days later, Professor McHenry announced project results in class. Lorraine's solo work had earned top marks. A few classmates clapped half-hearted but audible. Even Tasha looked surprised. After class, as Lorraine zipped her bag, she noticed a small scrap of folded paper under her kit. It read, "Dignity isn't pride, it's knowing your worth." Her mother's words, typed, anonymous. Lorraine sat there for a long moment. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just folded the paper again and slipped it into her back pocket like a secret only she was meant to hold. Lorraine walked home from class that Friday with a practiced pace, her tote slung over one shoulder and her hoodie shielding her from the bite of the mid-November wind. The sidewalk beneath her cracked in familiar patterns, places her feet knew, even when her mind was elsewhere. Her breath came out in small clouds as the sun slipped behind the rooftops. The pumpkin on the neighbor's porch had finally collapsed in on itself, more mold than orange now. At the corner, she passed the old house with the chain-link fence, where a woman sat bundled in 3 coats, talking softly to herself. Lorraine stopped, reached into her tote, and pulled out a wrapped muffin from Clyde's cafe. The woman took it without looking up, murmuring thanks to the air. Lorraine nodded once and kept walking. At home, Jordan had already turned on the small ceramic heater in the living room. Its low hum filled the silence as he read a comic book with his socks curled over the arms of the couch. "You're late," he said without looking up. "They added a guest speaker at the end," Lorraine replied. "Talked about trauma care." Jordan made a face. "Ugh. Can we not talk about blood while I'm eating dry cereal?" She gave a soft laugh, dropped her tote near the door, and went to the kitchen to heat up leftovers. Clyde's gumbo, which tasted even better 2 days old. As the scent filled the room, she exhaled slowly. Home always smelled like heat and broth in the fall, like comfort layered over frugality. After dinner, Jordan headed to his room with a sketch pad and headphones, leaving Lorraine in the quiet. She rinsed dishes, wiped counters, and finally sat down at the little table near the window where the mail sat in a crooked pile. Most of it was junk flyers, a grocery store circular, something from the cable company she didn't use. Then she saw it, a thick envelope with no return address. Her name handwritten in careful script, Lorraine Bell. She turned it over slowly, opened it with the dull side of a butter knife. Inside was a single page, no letterhead, no note. Just an official-looking document, a scholarship confirmation. Sterling Community College. Full tuition. No conditions. Anonymous donor. Her first reaction wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was suspicion. She checked the envelope again. No logo, no seal. Just that clean handwriting and her name. She didn't need a detective to figure out where it came from. The light flicker, the lab kit, the card in her mailbox, the porch bulb. It all traced back to one man. She walked to the window, looked out across the street. No black car, no shadows waiting, just stillness. Her reflection stared back at her through the glass, soft and tired. Down the hall, Jordan's laughter bubbled up through his door, muffled by music and memory. Lorraine returned to the table, slid the paper back into the envelope, and folded it once. Then she stood, walked to the kitchen trash bin, and dropped it in without hesitation. She didn't slam it down. She didn't cry. She just let it go quietly, intentionally. Because whatever this was, it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like debt. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator tick. Her thoughts spiraled, not angry, just weary. Gratitude shouldn't come with tracking numbers. Dignity shouldn't feel transactional. She thought of her mother standing in their childhood kitchen, declining help from a neighbor with a raised chin and a quiet voice. Dignity isn't pride, she had said, cutting potatoes with calm precision. It's knowing your worth before someone else puts a price on it. Lorraine had carried those words like armor ever since. In the morning, she dressed for class and opened the door to leave. Another envelope lay on the doormat, smaller this time, cream-colored. She bent to pick it up, heart already heavy. Inside was a card. No signature, just a sentence in the same careful script. This is not about owing, it's about honoring. Her hand tightened around the card. She looked up and down the street, empty. No one in sight. The card shook slightly between her fingers. Lorraine took a breath. Then two. She walked back inside, pulled out the scholarship notice from the trash, and laid both pieces on the table. She didn't read them again. She just sat with them. Let them exist. Let herself feel everything she hadn't allowed. Then she stood, picked them both up, slid them into the back of her notebook, and zipped it closed. Later at the bus stop, the air felt heavier, not colder. The clouds hung low. Lorraine leaned against the bench, eyes on the street. Across the road, she caught a glimpse of a man in a charcoal coat. He wasn't watching her. He was helping an elderly woman gather oranges that had spilled from her mesh bag. He moved gently, no rush, no grand gestures. He didn't look up. Lorraine turned away first. That evening, as she came home from the library, she paused at the door, keys in hand. Another envelope waited for her. She sighed, half frustration, half fatigue. She picked it up, tore it open without ceremony. Another scholarship. No name. Same elegant writing. Same silent generosity. And this time, Lorraine said it out loud to the night air, to no one in particular. I don't want your money. He had the power to change her life, but she had the power to change his heart. The morning sun stretched warm across the Nodai district, where the farmers' market bustled with weekend energy. Jazz floated from a street corner band, an easy horn-lace version of A Change Is Gonna Come, that danced between the smell of kettle corn and sweet apples. Booths lined the sidewalk with heirloom tomatoes, handmade soaps, and cider that steamed gently in foam cups. Lorraine adjusted the strap of her canvas tote and handed Jordan a folded $5 bill. Get the Honeycrisp apples, she said. Not the mealy ones like last time. Jordan rolled his eyes but grinned. Got it, Apple Inspector. She watched him weave through the crowd, his hoodie slightly too big, his sneakers too loud. He was growing into his stride finally. She tugged her coat tighter and moved toward the squash stall, admiring a basket of late-season butternuts. Across the street, unnoticed by her, Grant stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching. He wore a ball cap, low over his eyes, jeans, and a dark flannel shirt, clothes meant to blend in. A paper cup of cider warmed his fingers, but it was her he focused on. Lorraine relaxed for once, tilting a gourd slightly to check for firmness. Her twist-out caught the sun like a crown. She looked tired, yes, but alive. Grounded. He hadn't planned to follow her. He hadn't planned anything at all. Yet here he was, across from a woman who had asked for nothing and walked away with more space in his mind than any boardroom deal or press release ever had. A loud thud broke the jazz rhythm. People turned. A woman in her 70s had crumpled to the pavement near a crate of jars, her cane tipped over beside her. Lorraine was the first to move. She dropped her tote and was kneeling before anyone else processed what had happened. Mrs. Hattie, she said gently, brushing a braid from the woman's forehead. Can you hear me? The woman groaned, clutching her side. I'm okay, she muttered clearly. Not okay at all. Grant was already moving, weaving through the crowd. He saw Lorraine's hands checking the woman's wrist, her eyes scanning quickly, calm, controlled, the same way she had moved that day on the street. Ma'am, Lorraine said, I think you might have bruised a rib. Let's get you off the concrete first. Don't call no ambulance? Mrs. Hattie winced. It costs more than my pension. Lorraine nodded with a soft sigh. Then let's just help you up and get you home. Grant stepped forward just as Lorraine was shifting to lift. Need a hand? Lorraine froze for half a second, just long enough for recognition to land. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. Together they lifted Mrs. Hattie gently, Lorraine guiding the woman's back, Grant steadying her under the arms. A vendor brought over a folding chair, and the crowd slowly began to dissolve once they saw the situation handled. Mrs. Hattie took one look at Grant and squinted. You're too clean-cut for these markets, but thank you. Grant chuckled softly. Glad to help. Lorraine knelt again to adjust the woman's coat. You shouldn't be carrying full crates alone. Mrs. Hattie waved a hand. I'm stubborn. Ain't a crime. Jordan returned just in time to hand over the apples. What happened? Mrs. Hattie took a little fall, Lorraine said. We're walking her home. Mrs. Hattie perked up at that. With him, I like him. Grant raised an eyebrow, amused. The walk to her duplex was only 2 blocks, but every step felt like a conversation waiting to break open. Lorraine walked on one side of the woman, Grant on the other, their shoulders almost brushing. When they reached the front steps, Grant offered his arm again. Mrs. Hattie gave him a wink. You two look good together. Like one of them Hallmark movies, but with better cheekbones. Lorraine coughed a laugh, shaking her head. Go rest, Mrs. Hattie. The older woman grinned all the way to her door. As they turned to walk back, Jordan took the lead earbuds in, now bouncing a bit to a silent beat. And finally it was just the two of them. Lorraine spoke first. I know who you are. I figured, Grant said quietly. She didn't look at him. I didn't ask for anything. I know, he said again. That's why it mattered. They kept walking, not fast, not slow. At the corner, she glanced at him. Why the cloak and dagger? All these envelopes, cards, repairs. You could have just said thank you. He stopped walking. She did too. I needed to earn the space, Grant said. To say it without disrupting your life. Lorraine folded her arms. You already disrupted it. You made me question my instincts. Grant hesitated, then stepped just a little closer. Don't confuse gratitude with guilt. I didn't do it out of guilt. I did it because someone finally saw me when I couldn't see myself. She blinked, thrown for a moment by the rawness in his voice. Okay, she said slowly, but this doesn't make us friends. No, he said, voice calm. But maybe it makes us less than strangers. They walked slowly, careful with Mrs. Hattie's uneven steps as they turned off the main drag toward the neighborhood just past the market. Lorraine stayed on one side, Grant on the other, both steadying the older woman between them. Watch the curb now. Sugar, Mrs. Hattie said, to no one in particular, though both responded with a slight shift in their grips. These knees ain't what they used to be. Lorraine smiled even as she kept her eyes fixed on the pavement ahead. You know, Mrs. Hattie added slyly, if I'd known getting a little dizzy would get me 2 fine escorts, I might have done it sooner. Jordan, trailing behind with both grocery bags, now let out a dramatic groan. Miss Hattie, you flirting again? Child at my age, flirting is just breathing with style. They all laughed, even Grant, though his eyes lingered on Lorraine a second longer than necessary. When they reached her porch, Lorraine helped Mrs. Hattie sit on the swing while Grant went inside for a glass of water. Lorraine took the moment to check her pulse again, steady, and asked gently about her medications. Mrs. Hattie waved her off like a fly. I skipped breakfast, she admitted, trying to lose 4 pounds before Thanksgiving. Ain't that foolish? Just make sure you don't lose consciousness instead, Lorraine said. Well, Mrs. Hattie replied, if I do, at least I know I'll wake up to a good-looking rescue team. Grant returned with the water, offering it wordlessly. Mrs. Hattie sipped, then leaned back and looked between them. You two look good together, you know that. Lorraine stiffened. We're not? Not yet, Mrs. Hattie said, eyes closing. But life's funny like that. Sometimes the people you least expect are the ones who don't walk away. Grant met Lorraine's eyes briefly. She looked away. They said their goodbyes, making sure Mrs. Hattie had her phone and remote within reach before stepping off the porch. As they started back toward the market, Lorraine broke the silence. I know who you are. Grant didn't pretend otherwise. I figured. She stopped walking. You didn't have to come today. He didn't answer right away. The jazz music from the market floated faintly in the distance, mellow and bittersweet. I wasn't planning to, he admitted. I just wanted to see how the world looks when you're not behind glass. She tilted her head confused. Grant gave a faint shrug. When you have money, people curate your life. Filter what you see, who you talk to. I haven't just walked through a street market in years. Didn't realize I missed it. She didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. They reached the alley shortcut behind the cafe, quiet and dappled with leaf shadows. Thank you, he said finally. For what? For saving me. For not stepping over me like everyone else. Lorraine inhaled sharply through her nose. Don't confuse gratitude with guilt. I didn't do it for a reward. Grant nodded slowly. I know. That's why it matters. They kept walking this time without speaking. When they neared the edge of Lorraine's block, Grant glanced sideways. Do you ever wonder how many people pass us each day without knowing our stories? Every day, she said. But I stopped trying to prove mine. I admire that. They crossed the street. A car honked faintly somewhere behind them. I wasn't always, this Grant said, gesturing vaguely to the invisible empire around him. She didn't push him to elaborate, but something in her face made him continue. My dad died in a hallway, he said. Waiting for care we couldn't afford. That was the day I started learning to build things that would never need waiting rooms. Lorraine's steps slowed. I'm sorry. I used to think money could erase that memory, he added. It doesn't. But it can open doors for people who don't have the time to knock. They stood at her corner now, where the cracked sidewalk gave way to her street of leaning porches and windblown flyers. Why anonymous, she asked. Grant looked toward a kid riding a scooter down the block. Because dignity isn't something you put your name on. That made her pause. Jordan had gone ahead to unlock their front door and was now waving from the porch. Well, she said, voice softer now, thanks for walking us home. Grant nodded once. Can I see you again? She met his eyes searching. Come to Thanksgiving dinner, she said after a long beat. Community Center on Tyrone and 36th. Bring an appetite. No suits allowed. Then she turned toward the porch, already pulling her keys out. Behind her, Grant exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the alley. Lorraine didn't look back as she reached the porch, but she could hear Grant's steps hesitate, then recede slow and measured. The sound disappeared into the wind as she stepped inside and shut the door with a gentle click. Inside, the apartment smelled like cinnamon-sprinkled apples and something Jordan had tried baking, maybe. A single candle flickered on the windowsill. Lorraine hung her jacket and pressed her hand to her chest for a moment, letting the beat of her heart slow. That walk, that conversation, it wasn't what she expected. But neither was he. Jordan was at the kitchen table arranging slices of cheese into a smiley face on a plate. I like him, he said without looking up. Lorraine raised an eyebrow, slipping off her shoes. Who said anything about liking? I'm not blind, he replied, grinning. Besides, I saw the way he looked at you when you were helping Miss Hattie. Like you hung the moon. She rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched at the corners. Finish your lunch, little poet. He paused, then said more softly. You gonna invite him for Thanksgiving? She didn't answer at first. The silence said enough. Later that afternoon, Lorraine walked to the community center to finalize some details for the upcoming holiday. The center always smelled faintly of Lysol and crayons. Flyers lined the bulletin board, free flu shots, dance classes, a gospel choir practice. The director, Miss Reba, met her with a warm hug and a clipboard. We've got 12 families confirmed, 3 turkeys coming from the food bank, she said. And your green bean casserole better be showing up. Lorraine laughed. Wouldn't miss it. They walked the multi-purpose room together, counting chairs and checking outlets for the old slow cookers. There was something grounding about the ritual, people coming together with whatever they had, making enough. As they swept the floor near the folding chairs, Reba paused. I heard about what you did. That man you helped. Lorraine bristled. I didn't tell anyone here. You didn't have to. Clyde told me. Said it like a prayer, proud of you. Lorraine folded her arms. It wasn't a big deal. Reba leaned on her broom. That's the thing about goodness. It don't ask to be noticed. But it shines anyway. The words stuck to her ribs all the way home. By the time evening fell, Lorraine sat at the window, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, watching the dusk settle over the street. Porch lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere down the block, wind chimes caught a breeze and played a thin tune. Jordan appeared beside her with a blanket and their old family photo album. They hadn't opened it in months. He flipped to a page with a picture of their mother in a pink church hat holding baby Jordan and a much younger Lorraine by the hand. She'd like him, Jordan said. Lorraine didn't pretend to misunderstand. Why? Because he listens, Jordan said, and he doesn't try to fix you, just stands there with you. She let that sit for a long moment, then turned the page to a drawing tucked inside her old childhood crayon sketch of a rescue helicopter clumsily labeled Lorraine the Lifesaver. Jordan smiled. Guess you always knew who you were. She shrugged. Doesn't mean I've figured out where I'm going. The next day, Sunday, Lorraine woke early. The house was quiet. Jordan still wrapped in blankets on the couch. She brewed a pot of coffee and stepped out onto the porch in her slippers, sipping the warmth against the morning chill. Across the street, she noticed the porch light at Mrs. Hattie's flicker and go out again. She made a mental note to bring her a spare bulb. Before she turned to go inside, she spotted something unusual at the edge of the mailbox. A card thin and cream-colored, barely tucked under the red flag. She picked it up slowly, heart oddly calm. There was no name on the front. Inside, just a few words. Thank you for not looking away. No names, no pressure. She read it twice, then folded it back neatly and tucked it into the side pocket of her hoodie. Later that afternoon, she met Clyde at Hope Roast Cafe. He was arranging cranberry muffins behind the counter when she walked in. Morning sweetness, he said without looking up. You gave him my mailbox. Nope, he replied, eyes twinkling. I gave him a choice. He took the gentle one. She sighed. I didn't want this attention. Baby girl, it ain't about attention. Sometimes folks just need to give something back. Not to feel big, just to feel human. She took her regular seat, the one near the window. Clyde brought her a mug without asking. Chamomile, not coffee. He always knew when to switch. Thanksgiving dinner, she said quietly, stirring the tea. You think he'll come? I think Clyde said he's been trying to find a way to say thank you in a language you'll believe. Maybe food's the best he's got. That evening, as she walked home through falling golden leaves, Lorraine stopped at the community center one more time. The wind had torn a corner off one of the flyers. She retaped it, smoothing the edges carefully. She didn't believe in fairy tales. Not the ones where a kiss fixed everything or a prince arrived in time. But she did believe in showing up. In casseroles, in quiet gestures, and in second chances. When she climbed the steps to her porch, Jordan called out from the living room. Did you invite him? Lorraine smiled, slipping off her shoes. Come to Thanksgiving dinner, she said aloud, more to herself than anyone else. Community center. No suits allowed. She gave him no promises, but what she offered that night was something no check could buy. The folding tables clacked as Lorraine straightened them one by one, lining them end to end beneath the soft glow of string lights draped like constellations. She smoothed the paper tablecloth over the next one, its edges fluttering under a ceiling fan, and pressed her palms flat against it to still its motion. Around her, the Wilderidge Community Center bustled with movement. Neighbors carried trays of stuffing and sweet potatoes. Kids darted under tables, squealing with delight. And somewhere behind the kitchen doors, someone sang along to a gospel tune on the radio, a bit off-key, but full of joy. Lorraine paused to wipe her brow with the back of her hand. Her navy dress clung gently to her skin, modest, familiar, chosen with care. She didn't wear much makeup, just a touch of gloss, and the smallest pair of gold hoops her late mother had given her on her 30th birthday. Her protective twist-out was pinned half up, half down, out of her face, but still free. Mom. They need more chairs by the kids' table. Jordan called from across the hall, his voice rising over the chatter. He was wearing a too-big sweater with a cartoon turkey that literally blinked whenever he moved. Lorraine smiled at him and raised a hand in mock salute. I'm on it, Captain. She made her way over, adjusting chairs, then caught sight of Clyde near the door, holding a box of cranberry chutney jars and whispering something to a man just behind him. Lorraine couldn't quite see who it was. Only flannel sleeves, a pair of worn jeans, and a posture that looked out of place among the usual crowd of Wilderidge elders and teenagers. She froze for a half-second, not from fear but recognition, and something quieter. The man stepped forward. Grant. No suit, no fanfare. His curls were a little longer, tousled, like he hadn't combed them carefully enough. He wore boots that had seen mud and a wool coat that hung open, revealing a homemade label on the chutney jar in his hand, made with care. No sugar added. He didn't say anything at first, just gave her a small nod, like they were picking up a sentence paused a week ago. Lorraine gave the same nod back, almost imperceptibly. Clyde, grinning, held up a jar to anyone who'd listen. This guy here, just a fellow who brought the cranberry. That's it. Someone chuckled, and the moment passed like a breeze. Lorraine walked back to the kitchen counter, grabbing paper cups and stacking them next to the cider urn. Grant moved through the room slowly, almost reverently, nodding at strangers, helping an elderly man adjust his seat. He didn't hover near Lorraine. He didn't try to pull her aside. But when she bent down to pick up a spoon that had clattered to the floor, she felt him nearby, offering a napkin. Thank you, she said, not looking up. You're welcome, he said softly. Jordan saw him and wandered over, hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said. "Nice flannel." Grant looked down and smiled. "I wore it on purpose." "Good. Some folks show up here looking like they're on TV. You don't." "Thanks," Grant said, again, this time with a small laugh. Dinner was almost ready. Clyde clapped twice loudly. "All right now, family. We're going to bless this food, then dig in like we mean it." Everyone circled up. Clyde offered a short prayer, his voice warm and shaking slightly as he mentioned those who helped when help wasn't easy to give, and those missing from the table, but never from our hearts. Lorraine felt her mother's absence then, like a gentle tug behind her ribs. She looked at the empty seat beside her, where a scarf had been draped hand-knit in the same soft burgundy as her favorite hoodie. Mrs. Hattie gave her a small wink from across the table. As people filled their plates and laughter picked up again, Tasha leaned across a tray of cornbread and said without sarcasm, "You make this place better, just so you know." Lorraine blinked surprised. "Thank you," she said, and for once didn't doubt the sincerity. The food warmed the room from the inside out. Mac and cheese, roasted vegetables, carved turkey with perfect crispy skin. Grant helped pass plates, refilled water jugs, and never once mentioned who he was. The people around him simply welcomed him like one of their own. Then Clyde stood again, tapping his spoon gently against his glass. The noise hushed the room in ripples. "Before we wrap up dessert," he said, "we've got a guest who asked to say a quick word. Don't worry, it's short." He gestured toward Grant, then stepped back. Grant rose slowly, holding nothing in his hands. No notes, no prepared speech. Just his voice, low and even. "I wanted to thank someone here tonight," he began. "Someone who, when I had no name, no words, and no strength, chose to see me. Not for who I might be or what I could give, but just as a person." He looked at no one, or maybe everyone. "I won't say her name. She wouldn't want that. But I just wanted her and all of you to know. Kindness leaves a mark, even when no one's watching." Silence. Then Clyde clapped once firm. Then others followed. Not loud applause, not performative, just a rising warmth, like coals catching flame. Lorraine stared down at her plate, her eyes blurry. She wasn't used to being seen, especially not like this. Grant sat down quietly, picked up a fork, and asked Jordan if he wanted another slice of pie. The choir in the back, mostly teenagers and church elders, began softly humming "His Eye is on the Sparrow." The familiar tune drifted like cinnamon in the air, lacing the end of Grant's words with something sacred. Lorraine exhaled slowly, folded her napkin in her lap, and whispered only to herself, "That's enough." The song faded into soft clatter, plates being scraped clean, chairs shifting back, children chasing each other with napkin rings in hand. Lorraine slipped away, quietly stepping outside the side door that creaked no matter how carefully it was pushed. The cold met her skin like an old friend, sharp, familiar, and bracing. She hugged her arms close and leaned against the brick wall, eyes lifted toward the darkening sky, where strings of Christmas lights blinked unevenly over the parking lot. Behind her, the buzz of the community center carried on laughter, the scrape of a folding chair, Clyde's low voice teasing someone about a second helping. But out here it was just wind and memory. She thought about her mother again. Thanksgiving dinners with paper plates and gospel vinyls spinning in the corner, the smell of sweet potatoes with burnt edges, the sound of her mother's laugh. She remembered the way her mother used to pause at the table before anyone else lifted a fork and say, "Look around. If you still have someone to pass the rolls to, you're rich." The door creaked again. She didn't turn. Grant's footsteps were soft crunching over the frost-speckled grass. He didn't stand too close, just far enough for his breath to be a visible mist beside hers. "I didn't mean to make it about me," he said gently. "You didn't," she replied. "You made it about what mattered." Silence passed between them like warm cider cooling in a forgotten cup. He shifted slightly, the toes of his boots scuffing the sidewalk. "I've spent most of my life in rooms where people clapped too loud, talked too fast, and asked too little." She finally looked at him. "And tonight, I heard more in 30 seconds of quiet than I've heard in boardrooms for years." Lorraine smiled, but it was faint. Her voice stayed soft. "You didn't come to repay me." "No." He shook his head. I came to remember who I was. She studied him, really studied him for the first time without defenses up. There was no billionaire in front of her now. Just a man with tired eyes and gratitude he didn't know where to put. And who are you now? She asked. His breath caught barely before he answered. Someone who sees you. That moment didn't flare like fireworks. It settled like a blanket. No declarations, no swelling music, just understanding. From inside, someone called for Lorraine, a child's voice followed by laughter. I should go back in, she said, not moving. Grant nodded. Yeah, but neither of them turned. The quiet held them. Finally, she broke it. You cook your own cranberry chutney. I burned 3 batches, he admitted. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. But you brought the 4th. Actually, the 2nd. First edible one, he said with a small grin. A real laugh left her mouth before she could stop it. Well, we didn't die, so you're safe. I'll take that as a win. They walked back toward the building together. At the door, she paused. Grant. He looked down, hands still in his coat pockets. My mama used to say, some things can't be bought, can't be fixed, only shared. He nodded, waiting. I think tonight was one of those things. She didn't wait for a reply. She pushed the door open and walked in. Inside, the energy had shifted. Tables were being cleared, dishes stacked, and someone had pulled out an old Bluetooth speaker playing Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come. The slow, rich notes rolled through the room like a blessing. Clyde was helping Mrs. Hattie gather her cardigan, and Tasha was showing Jordan how to play dominoes with 2 older men, all of them arguing playfully about the rules. Grant stood in the doorway a moment longer, watching it all. Lorraine moved through the room like she belonged to every corner of it, handing out foil sheets, tying bags, hugging kids goodbye. He didn't follow yet. Mrs. Hattie caught his eye and waved him over with one slow curl of her fingers. When he reached her, she touched his arm and pressed something into his hand. A note written in slanted, shaky cursive. Love is quiet, so is trust. Let both grow. He looked up at her, but she was already turning back to her seat. Clyde passed by him, grinning wide. You gonna help with these chairs, or just stand there glowing? Grant chuckled. Tell me where you need me. They worked side by side, folding chairs, stacking plates, picking up cupcake wrappers from under tables. No one treated him differently. He liked that more than he could say. When the trash bags were tied and the lights dimmed low, Lorraine returned to the center of the room, where a small gospel trio stood warming up for one last song. The oldest singer, a woman with silver braids and a cane, nodded once before humming the first soft line. Why should I feel discouraged? The tune wrapped the room in something older than all of them, something born of suffering and carried in hope. Lorraine closed her eyes. Grant watched her from a few feet away, the distance between them no longer sharp, and then from the back of the room a shout, Lorraine. They're playing your song. Jordan was breathless, holding his phone, laughing as he ran up. You said you loved this one? Come on. She opened her eyes, blinking in the dim light, and looked at Grant. She didn't speak. She just reached out and grabbed his hand, firm, warm, no hesitation, and pulled him toward the center. He followed. He followed. Not because he had to, not because he was expected to, but because in that moment, in the middle of folding tables and string lights and gospel melodies, something in him softened. Something in him shifted. Lorraine didn't look back as she led him across the scuffed floor, weaving between neighbors who were now swaying or clapping gently to the trio's tune. She stopped near the front where the music swelled and turned to face him. Her hand let go, not abruptly, just enough to say, "This is yours to choose now." Grant stood there for a breath, maybe 2. Then he mirrored her stance, arms, relaxed expression open. A slow smile found its way to his face as he tilted his head toward the music, letting it carry him. Jordan danced past them, grabbing a little girl by the hand and spinning her until they both collapsed into chairs, laughing breathlessly. Nearby, Clyde tapped his cane to the beat shoulders, moving with the kind of rhythm that comes from decades of joy and sorrow mingled together. Lorraine's gaze drifted from face to face, people she'd known for years. Folks who'd sat beside her during hard times, neighbors who'd offered rides, casseroles, prayers. And now Grant stood among them, not as a stranger or a story, but as part of something older than wealth or rescue. When the final note faded, the room didn't erupt in applause. It sighed deeply, like something had been exhaled from everyone at once. The singers bowed, and the eldest among them leaned into the mic. "We don't always get what we want," she said, voice like sanded oak, "but sometimes the Lord sends us what we need." Someone whispered amen. Someone else whispered nothing, but felt it all the same. Later, after tables were cleaned and dishes packed, Lorraine stepped outside again, this time with a cup of warm cider in her hand. The night had grown colder, the sky sharp and clear above the dark branches. She heard footsteps behind her. "I was waiting for you," she said without turning. Grant chuckled. "You always say that, like you're surprised I came." "I usually am." He moved beside her, his own cup steaming faintly. "You know, I've been in rooms worth millions, homes with more square footage than this whole building, but I've never felt full like I did in there." Lorraine nodded, sipping slowly. "That's what happens when you sit down and let people feed you with more than food." They stood in silence for a while, watching breath clouds disappear into the dark. "I keep thinking about something you said," he murmured. "About not wanting money. About not needing a reward." She looked at him now, really looked. "I don't." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm still here." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a photo worn around the edges. He handed it to her, with the hesitation of someone offering a piece of their soul. It was a black and white picture, clearly old. A young boy, maybe 7, grinning beside a woman in scrubs who held his hand at a clinic doorway. "That's my mom," Grant said. "And me?" "She died 3 weeks after that photo." Lorraine traced the woman's face with her eyes. "She worked in a public clinic, could have gone private, but she said, people who need care the most shouldn't be the ones priced out of it." He smiled, but it was tinged with something deeper. "I forgot that for a while. Got caught up in power and pace and platforms. Until you made me remember." Lorraine folded the photo carefully and handed it back. "Then maybe that's enough." He took it gently. From the parking lot, Jordan called out, "Hey, they're bringing out the pumpkin pie." Lorraine turned halfway. "Go ahead, I'll be in soon." Grant watched her in the moonlight, the edge of her curls catching the glow, the quiet pride in the way she held herself. "Lorraine," he said softly. She met his gaze. "I'm not here to impress you, or fix you, or offer anything shiny." She raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I'm here because I want to know who I am when I'm around you." She didn't smile, not yet, but the corner of her mouth lifted ever so slightly. "You're just a guy who brought the cranberry," she said, voice teasing but tender. He laughed low and full. "Guess I am." The door creaked open again, and Mrs. Hattie peeked out, bundled in her coat, waving a spoon. "Y'all better not miss this pie." Lorraine started walking toward the building, then stopped. She looked back at Grant, standing under the twinkling lights, hands in pockets, face soft in the cool night. "You coming?" she asked. He didn't answer with words. He just stepped forward and closed the distance. And as they crossed the threshold together, the door swung shut behind them, not to close a chapter, but to keep the warmth in. Even without headlines or handshakes, something changed that night beneath the string lights and folding tables. A woman who once chose silence became the quiet reason a man remembered how to listen again. Because sometimes kindness isn't about what it gives, it's about what it restores. And when we stop judging by appearances, we often find the most extraordinary people in the most ordinary places. Like a porch light left on, or a seat saved at a crowded table, grace tends to show up where we least expect it. So if this story touched something tender in you, maybe pass it on. Someone out there might need the reminder that being seen, really seen, can still change everything.